Every day, a young woman sold roasted corn on the streets of Lagos, smiling at strangers who barely looked her way. She never complained. She never asked for pity, but one afternoon, a convoy of black SUVs stopped right in front of her small stand, and her whole life changed in a way she never expected. Who was the man stepping out of that car, and what was the woman's true connection to a world she seemed to have left behind? Sit back and find out as we delve into this touching story. In the heart of Lagos, where the sound of car horns mixed with the voices of street vendors, a young woman stood beside her small corn stand. Her name was Millie. She was only 24 years old, but the way she carried herself, you would think she had lived many lives. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, she arranged her corn carefully on the metal grill. The smoke rose gently as the corn roasted. She wiped her hands on her worn apron and whispered to herself, "Today will be better." It has to be. Millie's life was simple. She woke up in a tiny room she rented at the edge of the city. She roasted corn. She smiled at customers. She counted small coins at the end of each day. And at night, she stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was all life had for her. But Millie was not always a street hawker. Years ago, before the accident, before everything fell apart, she lived a different life. A life with soft beds, music lessons, and a father who called her "my little diplomat." But that was long ago. So long ago that sometimes she wondered if it was real or just a dream. Now she was alone, no family, no name, no past she could prove. One afternoon, as she fanned the smoke away from her grill, a voice called out, "Excuse me, miss." Millie turned. A tall man stood in front of her stand. He wore an expensive suit. His shoes shone even under the dust of the street. His face was calm, but his eyes looked tired. "Good afternoon, sir," Millie said politely. "Would you like some corn?" The man stared at her for a moment, then he nodded slowly. "Yes, one corn, please." Millie picked the best one, wrapped it carefully, and handed it to him. "That will be 200 naira, sir." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp 1,000 naira note. "Keep the change," he said. Millie blinked in surprise. "Sir, that is too much." "It's fine," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked back toward a black SUV parked a few meters away. Millie watched him leave, confused. She looked down at the money in her hand and whispered, "Who was that?" She did not know it yet, but that man was about to become the most important person in her life. Far across the city, inside a tall glass building, that same man sat behind a large desk. His name was Silas Walker. He was 32 years old, and he was one of the richest men in Nigeria. Silas was the CEO of Walker Industries, a company his late father had built from nothing. But now, his father was gone, and before he died, he left behind one condition in his will. Silas's lawyer sat across from him, reading the document aloud. "Mr. Walker, your father's will clearly states that you must be married before your 33rd birthday. If you are not, the company will be transferred to your cousin, Jonathan Walker." Silas clenched his jaw. "That gives me less than 2 months." "Yes, sir," the lawyer said carefully. "Your father wanted you to settle down. He believed it would make you a better leader?" Silas stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the city below. "My father always had a plan," he muttered. "Even from the grave." The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "So, what will you do, sir?" Silas turned slowly. His face was hard. His voice was cold. "I will get married." 2 weeks passed. Silas tried everything. He attended social events. He met daughters of business partners. He even let his mother introduce him to women from good families. But every woman he met wanted the same thing: his money, his name, his status. None of them felt real. One evening, Silas sat alone in his mansion. The house was huge, but it felt empty. He poured himself a drink and stared at the wall. His assistant, a young man named Kingsley, knocked on the door. "Sir, there is a charity walk tomorrow morning. Your PR team thinks it would be good for your image if you attended." Silas sighed. "Fine. Arrange it." The next morning, Silas walked through the streets of Lagos surrounded by cameras, journalists, and security. It was all for show. He smiled when he was supposed to smile. He waved when he was supposed to wave, but his mind was somewhere else. Then he saw her. Millie stood beside her corn stand, watching the crowd pass by. She was not trying to sell anything. She was just watching, her hands folded in front of her. Silas stopped walking. Something about her face made him pause. She looked peaceful, calm, real. Before he knew it, he was walking toward her. "Good morning," he said. Millie looked up, surprised. "Good morning, sir." Silas stared at her for a moment, then he asked quietly, "What is your name?" "Millie," she replied softly. "Millie," he repeated. He looked at her closely. Her eyes were clear. Her smile was gentle. She did not look at him the way other women did. And in that moment, Silas made a decision. "Millie," he said carefully. "I need to ask you something." Millie tilted her head. "What is it, sir?" Silas took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" Millie froze. Her mouth opened slightly, her eyes went wide. "What?" "I know this sounds strange," Silas said quickly. "But I need a wife. It is complicated. I will pay you well. You will live comfortably. And after 1 year, if you want to leave, you can." Millie stared at him in shock. "Sir, I don't understand." "You don't have to understand," Silas said. "Just say yes." Millie's heart pounded in her chest. She looked down at her hands, her small, rough hands that smelled like roasted corn. Then she looked back at him. "Why me?" she whispered. Silas paused. "Because you don't want anything from me." Millie stood there silent. Her mind raced. She thought about her tiny room, her empty savings, her lonely nights. Then she whispered, "Okay." Silas blinked. "Okay?" "Yes," Millie said quietly. "I will marry you." 3 days later, Millie stood in front of a mirror wearing a simple white dress. There was no big wedding, no guests, no music, just Silas, a judge, and 2 witnesses. When the judge said, "You may now kiss the bride," Silas leaned forward and kissed Millie gently on the forehead. It was not love, it was business, but something inside Millie's chest stirred anyway. After the ceremony, Silas turned to her. "Pack your things. You will move into my house today." Millie nodded slowly. "Okay." That evening, Millie stepped into Silas's mansion for the first time. Her eyes widened as she looked around. The floors were marble, the walls were tall, everything sparkled. A tall, elegant woman walked down the stairs. Her hair was styled perfectly. Her dress was expensive. She looked Millie up and down with cold eyes. "So," the woman said slowly, "this is the wife." Silas stepped forward. "Mother, this is Millie." "Millie, this is my mother, Madeline Walker." Madeline's lips curved into a thin smile. "Welcome to the family, dear." But her eyes said something else. Behind Madeline, a younger man appeared. He was tall, handsome, and his smile was sharp. "Well, well," he said. "My cousin finally got married." "Jonathan," Silas said coldly. "What are you doing here?" Jonathan walked down the stairs slowly. "I came to meet the woman who saved your inheritance." He looked at Millie with amused eyes. "Tell me, how much did he pay you?" Millie's face went red. She looked down at her feet. "That's enough," Silas said firmly. Jonathan laughed. "Relax, cousin. I'm just curious." He leaned closer to Millie. "You do know this marriage is fake, right? He just needed a wife on paper." "Jonathan," Madeline warned. "Leave the girl alone." But Jonathan only smiled. "I'm just being honest." He turned and walked away, whistling. Millie stood frozen. Her hands trembled. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. Silas placed a hand on her shoulder gently. "Ignore him," he said quietly. "He is just jealous." Millie nodded, but her heart felt heavy. The first week in the mansion was the hardest. Millie tried to stay quiet. She tried to stay out of the way, but everywhere she went, people stared. The maids whispered when she passed, the cook frowned when she entered the kitchen, and Madeline watched her like a hawk. One morning, Millie sat alone in the large dining room. She picked up a fork carefully, unsure which one to use. Madeline walked in and sat across from her. "You don't know how to use a fork properly, do you?" Millie froze. I'm still learning." Madeline laughed softly. "Learning? How charming." She leaned forward. "Tell me, Millie, what did you do before you married my son?" "I sold corn, ma'am," Millie said quietly. "Corn," Madeline repeated. She shook her head slowly. "My son married a corn seller." Millie looked down at her plate. Her hands shook a little. "Do you know why he married you?" Madeline asked coldly. Millie did not answer. "Because he needed anyone," Madeline continued. "Anyone at all. You were just convenient." Millie's chest tightened. She wanted to cry, but she did not. Instead, she looked up and said softly, "I know." Madeline blinked, surprised. "I know I'm not from your world," Millie said. "But I am here now, and I will do my best." Madeline stared at her for a long moment, then she stood up and walked away without another word. Days turned into weeks. Millie learned to move quietly through the mansion. She learned which rooms to avoid. She learned when to speak and when to stay silent. But every night she felt more alone. One evening, she sat in her room staring at a small silver bracelet on her wrist. It was the only thing she had from her past, the only proof that she once belonged somewhere. She ran her fingers over the engraving. The letters were faded, but she could still read them. Always loved. Tears filled her eyes. "Who am I?" she whispered. A soft knock came at the door. Millie quickly wiped her eyes. "Yes?" Silas stepped inside. He looked at her carefully. "Are you okay?" Millie nodded. "Yes, I'm fine." Silas did not believe her. He walked closer and sat on the chair near her bed. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said gently. Millie looked away. "I'm not pretending." "Millie," Silas said softly. "I know this is hard. I know my family is not kind to you. But I want you to know something." He paused. "You are not just a contract to me." Millie looked up, surprised. "I see you," Silas continued. "I see the way you try, the way you carry yourself. You are stronger than you think." Millie's eyes filled with tears again. "Thank you," she whispered. Silas stood up slowly. "If you ever need anything, tell me." Then he walked to the door, but before he left, he turned back. "Good night, Millie." "Good night," she whispered. The next morning, Millie woke up early. She walked through the mansion quietly, exploring. She passed the library, the sitting room, the gallery filled with paintings. Then she heard it, piano music. She stopped. The melody was familiar, too familiar. She pushed the door open gently. Inside, a grand piano sat near the window. Silas was sitting there, playing. "That song," Millie whispered. Silas stopped playing. He turned to look at her. "You know it?" Millie nodded slowly. Her heart pounded. "My father used to play it for me." Silas frowned. "Your father played piano?" Millie froze. She had said too much. I have to go," she said quickly and turned to leave. But Silas stood up. "Wait." Millie stopped but did not turn around. "Millie," Silas said carefully. "Who was your father?" Millie's hands trembled. "I don't remember," she whispered. "You don't remember?" Silas asked. "Or you don't want to tell me?" Millie turned slowly. Tears streamed down her face. "I don't remember," she said, her voice breaking. "I lost everything in an accident. My memory. My family. My name. All I have is this." She lifted her wrist, showing him the bracelet. "And I don't even know what it means." Silas walked closer. He looked at the bracelet carefully. His eyes narrowed. He read aloud. What does it stand for? I don't know, Millie whispered. I've been trying to remember for years. Silas looked at her face, really looked at her, and for the first time, he saw the pain she had been hiding. Millie, he said softly. I will help you find out. Millie blinked. What? I will help you, Silas repeated. We will find out who you are, together. Millie's lips trembled. Why would you do that? Silas reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. Because you deserve to know. That night, Silas could not sleep. He kept thinking about Millie, about the bracelet, about the melody she recognized. Something was not right. The next morning, Silas called Kingsley into his office. I need you to investigate someone. Who, sir? Kingsley asked. My wife, Silas said. Kingsley blinked. Sir? Find out everything you can about her, Silas said firmly. Her past, her family, everything. Start with missing persons reports from 15 years ago. Look for anyone with the initials MH. Kingsley nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Meanwhile, Millie tried to settle into her new life. She helped the maids even when they told her not to. She learned to set the table properly. She practiced walking in heels. But every night, she lay awake, wondering about her past. One afternoon, Madeline found her in the library. What are you doing here? She asked sharply. Millie looked up from the book she was reading. I was just looking at the books, ma'am. Madeline walked closer. She looked at the book in Millie's hands. Diplomatic History of West Africa, she read aloud. Interesting choice for a corn cellar. Millie closed the book quickly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You can read? Madeline interrupted. Millie nodded. Yes, ma'am. Madeline's eyes narrowed. And how did a street girl learn to read so well? Millie's face went pale. I don't remember learning. I just could. Madeline stared at her for a long moment, then she said quietly, You are hiding something. I'm not. Don't lie to me, Madeline said coldly. I have lived long enough to know when someone is not who they say they are. Millie's heart raced. I'm not hiding anything, ma'am. I just don't remember my past. Madeline studied her face carefully, then she turned and walked away, leaving Millie shaking. That evening, something unexpected happened. Jonathan walked into the living room where Millie sat reading. He poured himself a drink and sat across from her. You know, he said casually, I've been watching you. Millie looked up, nervous. Why? Jonathan swirled his drink. Because you're strange. You don't act like someone from the streets. Millie closed her book. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do, Jonathan said, leaning forward. The way you sit, the way you speak, even the way you hold that book. He paused. You've had training, education, maybe even, he smiled slowly. Etiquette lessons. Millie's hands trembled. You're wrong. Am I? Jonathan asked. He stood up and walked to the window. My cousin thinks he married a nobody, but I think he married someone who's forgotten who they really are. He turned back to her. And when the truth comes out, this family is going to look very foolish. Millie stood up quickly. Excuse me, she said and walked out of the room. Jonathan watched her leave, a knowing smile on his face. 2 weeks later, Kingsley walked into Silas's office with a folder in his hand. His face was pale. His hands trembled slightly. Sir, Kingsley said carefully. You need to see this. Silas opened the folder. Inside were old newspaper clippings, photos, documents. His eyes widened as he read. Ambassador's daughter missing after tragic accident. Millie Harrington, age 9. Presumed dead. Ambassador David Harrington continues search for missing daughter. Silas stared at the photo. It was a young girl with bright eyes and a familiar smile, the same bracelet on her wrist. Millie Harrington, Kingsley said quietly. Daughter of Ambassador David Harrington. She disappeared 15 years ago after a car accident that killed her mother. The child was never found. Everyone believes she died too. Silas's hands shook as he held the photo. She is alive, he whispered. Yes, sir, Kingsley said. And she has been living on the streets all this time, with no memory of who she really is. Silas closed the folder slowly. His chest felt tight. She is not just a street hawker, he said quietly. She is the daughter of one of the most powerful diplomats in the world. Kingsley nodded. Her father is still searching for her. He never gave up. According to my research, Ambassador Harrington built a massive financial empire after his wife's death. He poured everything into finding his daughter. He's now one of the wealthiest men in Europe. Silas leaned back in his chair, processing everything. So the woman I married to save my inheritance is actually wealthier than my entire family combined. Yes, sir, Kingsley confirmed. If she reclaims her identity, she becomes one of the most powerful women in the world. Silas rubbed his face with both hands. Contact Ambassador Harrington immediately. Tell him we found his daughter. Yes, sir, Kingsley said. But sir, when will you tell Millie? Silas paused. Tonight, he said. I will tell her tonight. That evening, Silas found Millie sitting in the garden. She was humming that same melody again, the one her father used to play. Millie, he said softly. She looked up. Yes? Silas sat beside her. His heart pounded. I need to tell you something. Millie saw the serious look on his face. What is it? Silas took a deep breath. I know who you are. Millie's face went pale. What do you mean? Your real name, Silas said gently. It's not just Millie, it's Millie Harrington. Millie's eyes widened. Harrington? She whispered. Silas nodded. You are the daughter of Ambassador David Harrington. You disappeared 15 years ago after an accident. Everyone thought you died. But you didn't. You survived. Tears filled Millie's eyes. My father, she whispered. Is he alive? Yes, Silas said. And he has been searching for you ever since. Millie covered her mouth with her hands. Tears streamed down her face. I have a father, she whispered. I have a family. Silas reached out and held her hand. He is coming here tomorrow. Millie looked at him, her eyes filled with hope and fear. What if he doesn't recognize me? What if I'm not the daughter he remembers? You are, Silas said firmly. You are his daughter. And nothing will change that. Millie leaned against Silas's shoulder and cried. He wrapped his arm around her gently, letting her release all the pain she had carried for so many years. There's something else you should know, Silas said quietly. Your father, he's not just a diplomat anymore. After you disappeared, he built a financial empire. He used his resources to search for you. He never stopped, and now... Silas paused. Now he's one of the wealthiest men in the world. Millie lifted her head, shocked. What? Everything he built was for you, Silas said. You're not just his daughter, you're his heir. Millie's hands trembled. I don't understand. How can this be real? It's real, Silas said gently. Tomorrow everything changes. The next afternoon. The mansion was filled with tension. Madeline stood in the hallway, confused. Jonathan paced back and forth, suspicious. The maids whispered nervously. Then, a convoy of diplomatic vehicles pulled up to the mansion. Security guards stepped out first. Then a tall man with gray hair emerged, Ambassador David Harrington. Millie stood at the top of the stairs, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. Her legs felt weak, her hands trembled. The ambassador walked into the mansion. His eyes scanned the room. Then they landed on Millie. Time stopped. He stared at her face, at her eyes, at the bracelet on her wrist. Millie, he whispered, his voice breaking. Millie's tears fell freely. Papa? She whispered back. The ambassador's face crumpled. My little girl, he said, his voice shaking. My little diplomat. Millie ran down the stairs. She ran into his arms, and when they embraced, the entire mansion fell silent. The ambassador held her tightly, sobbing. I searched for you, he said. I never stopped. I never gave up. I'm sorry, Papa, Millie cried. I'm so sorry. I couldn't remember. I couldn't find my way back. It's not your fault, the ambassador said, pulling back to look at her face. You're here now. You're alive. That's all that matters. He touched her face gently, tracing every feature as if memorizing her all over again. You look just like your mother, he whispered. So beautiful. So strong. Madeline stood frozen, her face pale. Jonathan's mouth hung open in shock. Silas stood quietly in the corner, watching. His chest felt warm. The truth came out quickly after that. Millie was not just the daughter of a diplomat. She was the heir to the Harrington fortune, one of the wealthiest and most influential families in Europe. Her father had built a financial empire while searching for her. Everything he owned was meant for her. Overnight, the poor street hawker became wealthier and more powerful than anyone in the Walker family. The news spread through Lagos like wildfire. Journalists camped outside the mansion. Business partners called Silas, shocked. Television stations ran the story on every channel. Lost heiress found after 15 years. Street hawker, revealed as billionaire's daughter. The Walker marriage that shocked the world. Madeline's face went from pale to red. She sat in her room, staring at the wall. I mocked her, she whispered. I treated her like she was nothing. Jonathan sat in the living room, his head in his hands. She is richer than all of us combined, he muttered. And I called her convenient. The maids who had whispered about Millie now bowed deeply whenever she passed. The cook who had frowned at her now prepared special meals just for her. The security guards who had looked down on her now stood at attention. But Millie did not change. She was still kind, still gentle, still humble. One afternoon, Madeline found the courage to approach her. Millie, she said quietly. May I speak with you? Millie looked up from the book she was reading. Of course, ma'am. Madeline sat down slowly. She looked at her hands. I owe you an apology, she said. I treated you terribly. I judged you. I looked down on you and I was wrong. Millie listened quietly. You showed more grace and dignity than anyone in this house, Madeline continued. You are not the one who should be ashamed. I am. Millie reached out and placed her hand on Madeline's. I forgive you, she said softly. Madeline's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. You are more gracious than I deserve. Later that week, Jonathan also came to apologize. He stood at Millie's door, looking uncomfortable. I was cruel to you, he said quietly. I thought you were taking advantage of my cousin, but the truth is you never asked for anything. You never wanted anything, and I judged you wrongly. Millie nodded. I accept your apology, Jonathan. For what it's worth, Jonathan added, I think my cousin is lucky to have you. Not because of who your father is, but because of who you are. That evening, Silas found Millie standing on the balcony. The sun was setting. The city lights were beginning to glow. Are you going to leave? Silas asked quietly, stepping beside her. Millie turned to him. Do you want me to? Silas looked at her closely. No, he said. I don't. Why? Millie asked softly. Silas took her hand. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being a contract. It stopped being business. He paused. You became real to me, Millie. You became someone I care about deeply. Millie's eyes softened. You became real to me too, she whispered. Silas stepped closer. I know I married you for the wrong reasons. I know this started as something fake. But, he took a deep breath. I want it to be real now if you'll let it. Not because you're Ambassador Harrington's daughter, not because you're wealthy, but because you're you. Millie's heart pounded. Are you sure? Everything has changed. Nothing important has changed, Silas said firmly. You're still the woman who recognized that melody. You're still the one who forgave my mother. You're still the one who carries grace in her heart. He squeezed her hand. That's who I want. That's who I choose. Millie smiled through her tears. Then yes, she whispered. Let's make it real. Silas leaned forward and kissed her. Not on the forehead this time, but on the lips, soft, gentle, true. And in that moment, they both knew. They had found something neither of them expected, love. Later that night, back at the mansion, the Walker and Harrington families gathered for dinner. It was the first time both families sat together as one. Ambassador Harrington raised his glass. "To my daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "who survived the impossible and came back to us with a heart full of grace." Everyone raised their glasses. "And to Silas," the ambassador continued, looking at his son-in-law, "who saw her value before the world knew her name." Silas nodded, his hand finding Millie's under the table. My dear viewers, what do you think about this touching story? Please share your thoughts in the comment section. I would love to read from you. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching.